So your buddy just texted you and he left you high and dry for today's workout. You're on your own. That is until I replace him with someone much better. Today I'm going to give you the opportunity to train with your dream workout partner, and it gets to be one of these 6 guys. Who's your pick going to be? What's up guys, Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com. What you see behind me is 6 of the most iconic action heroes of all time. Each instantly recognizable, even if you didn't have the great fortune to grow up in the 80s and 90s like I did. However, today they're more than that. They're your workout partner, and you get to pick which one you want to replace that lame workout partner with, and we're going to help you to do so by defining and grading each of them in 4 different categories. So we all know that a good training partner has the ability to motivate you, right? To push you to do things that maybe you don't want to do. Which one of these guys do you think has the ability to best push you to get to that next level? The second category we have to look at is their physique, and what is the one that matches your goal the best. Everybody's going to have a different pick here, but I want you to make sure that you're picking based upon the physique that you want. The third category here is their training style. And believe it or not, each of these guys, though they all look really good, have a different approach to how they got the job done. Which one matches up best with how you prefer to train? And then finally, the fourth category is that X factor, right? Which of these guys, if you had only one choice, would be the one that you wanted to hang out with? Could be because you just like their movies more than others, or it could be because you simply just think that they have the best likability. We're going to rank them from 0 to 10. Again, these ratings are based on my personal preferences, but I want you to be able to go through the same rating scale and determine who your pick is going to be. Make sure you leave them in the comments below. And so we kick off this list with maybe one of the most popular martial artists of all time. We're talking about Jean Claude Van Damme. And now look, this is a guy that actually people wanted to be like. I remember when his movies came out, people would dress like him. When I posted this on Instagram, my buddy Chris Daughtry sent me a picture showing me just how bad he wanted to be Van Damme when he was a kid. I mean, he damn near pulled it off. But when it comes to motivation, this is a guy that I never really thought was someone that's going to scream at me during a workout. Well, there's that, but I just don't know how functional that will be during, let's say, a bench press. So for me, he gets an 8 in the motivation category. Now, as far as physique, he had everything I was looking for. At 5'10", 176 pounds, he was highly relatable to me. He had that muscle definition in size almost to perfection, and of course epitomizing what ATHLEAN-X is about. If you want to look like an athlete, you got to train like one. Van Damme, of course, is an athlete with an athlete's body. He gets a 10 as far as his physique goal. Now, when you're talking about his training style, you're talking about someone who was an athlete first, an actor second. So his training reflected that. This is a guy who was a black belt by the age of 18, a competitive kickboxer internationally, and also had a 5-year ballet career. So he had all the attributes of a high-level athlete. However, he did have an appreciation for bodybuilding and also competed in bodybuilding in his teens. The workouts he favored were ones where he could put 2 muscle groups together in the same workout, but also have room for kickboxing and, of course, his all-important stretching. And we all know how good Van Damme was at stretching. Now, these workouts were done on an every other day basis, leaving room for his conditioning, which is something that I do in a lot of our ATHLEAN-X programs. So here we definitely align with our training styles, and for that he gets a solid 9. Now when it comes to the final X factor here, I have a confession to make. I was never really one of the Van Damme guys. I know a lot of you out there are. However, for me, I always found his movies to be just a little bit cheesy. Doesn't mean I didn't watch him though, but if I had to choose a single training partner, he just wouldn't really get that X factor for me, so we round out his score with a 7 in that category. Next we have Dolph Lundgren, a guy who I grew up wanting to hate because of course what he did to Apollo Creed, but now we have a different set of standards here. Is he going to be the guy that I train with? And when it comes to motivation and the ability to motivate me, I kind of think he could do this. And the reason why I actually say this is you might think that, oh, well, he's kind of a stoic, quiet guy, but I actually know better. You see, I trained with Florian Montiano, who played Drago's son in the Creed 2 movie, and he told me something about him. He said he can train us all under the table at his current age right now. He's a badass still to this day and also a very likable guy, but has the ability to push you and motivate you all the way to your last rep. I'm going to give him a 9 in this category. Of course, there's nothing to not like about Dolph Lundgren's physique. But the thing about it was, from a relatability standpoint, there wasn't much for me, because we're talking about a guy who was 6'5", 245 pounds. Yeah, I would like to look like that, but I never will. So for that, I just didn't really have a high relatability, so I had an 8.5 in this category. Now, as far as his training style, there's another guy who's an example of being an athlete first, an actor second. And when we talk about athlete, this guy was competing at a high level. From the age of 7 and all the way into his 20s, Dolph was competing internationally in both karate and judo, with most of his training focusing on how to improve and be the best in sport. It wasn't until the opportunity for Rocky IV came along that he switched his training focus. And what happened here was a couple of things. Firstly, he kind of shelved his athletic training in favor of almost exclusively bodybuilding training at this point. And he did so on a push-pull leg split, which we know I'm a big fan of. He did a 6-day continuous push-pull legs with a repeated day off on Sunday. However, he would choose 3 to 4 exercises per muscle group with 4 sets per exercise and then 6 to 12 reps on every set. This is what's been reported, but if it's accurate, it's too much volume for me. I would not have the ability to recover from that type of volume, so while we get the extra points for having the right split, we don't get points for the amount of volume, and we certainly don't get the points for the fact that we had to shelve the athletic training altogether. I think there's a way we can incorporate both, so I give him the 7 in the training style category. Now lastly, as we get to the X factor here, though admittedly he gave me nightmares as a child, I still have that appeal of wanting to actually make that workout happen with Florian, so I'm going to give him a good solid 8 in this category. All right, so let's stick with the Rocky theme now and talk about Carl Weathers. Another one of those guys that I didn't really start off liking, but of course became a big fan of when he went and helped out Rocky. Now all you had to do though is watch that training scene in Rocky III to realize what an amazing motivator Apollo could be. If I had one guy that I needed screaming in my ear to make sure I could get that final rep done, he's the guy I go to, and for that I'm going to give him a solid 10 in the motivation category. As far as the physique, this is another one of those guys that represents everything that I wanted. Right, the perfect amount of muscle mass and leanness, except at 6'2", 220, again, he was a guy that was a little bit bigger than I could relate to. So for that, I have to give him a little bit of a notch down, but again, still a solid 9.5. As far as the training style, he did something very interesting. He teamed up with Vince Gironda to do something called peripheral heart action training, which is a style of training that works your total body in one workout, sequentially one exercise after the next, with no rest in between. And the desired outcome here was to help you to burn fat and build muscle at the same time, doing a little bit better job at burning fat than building muscle. That being said, he would do these workouts for 7 consecutive rounds, which is a lot more than anybody else that Vince was training. They would usually cap out at 4 or 5 rounds. All sets were performed for 12 repetitions, sometimes with weights that were very light to get the benefits of that cardiovascular conditioning, and sometimes on the heavier end, even to the point where he would rest pause his way to the 12 reps, with the goal here being to kind of put on more size. Though this is something Carl has said many times he never had a problem with. Well, I can't really relate to that, and a total body workout for me is going to look a lot different, and for that reason, it's going to be a 7.5 in the training style. And finally, for that X factor, whether it was Action Jackson or Predator, I always kind of looked at Carl Weathers as just a bad man. You know, someone that you'd want to have your back in a bar fight. Well, for all these reasons, for me, he's going to get a solid score of 8 in that X factor category. Fourth up is going to be first up on many people's list for the person that they want to train with, and I have to say, who wouldn't want to train with Arnold? When it comes to motivation, again, I got another guy who's sitting up there at the very top with a solid 10. I know he could get me to do something that I didn't want to do. I know that if I'm in a workout and he asked me to do something, even if he did it very politely, I'd never want to disappoint him, and of course I would give him my A+ effort. So for that, I'm going to give him the 10. Now when it comes to the physique goal, I got to be honest here. Although I always wanted to be Arnold, I knew from day one I'd never look like Arnold. All I had to do was look in the mirror at my chest, even now, and I don't see that. And I knew that I didn't have the genetics to ever be him. At 6'3", 235, again, he felt too far out of reach for me. So while he had everything in perfect proportion, I have to give him an 8.5 here because there was just no relatability for me, though it might be vastly different for you. Now when it came to the training style, again, what was there not to like about Arnold? Arnold set the standard for training. He had an entire encyclopedia of bodybuilding that he put out that, of course, I had not just one copy of, but 2. He had a variety of different splits, but he always did have a foundation and dedication to not just the aesthetics of bodybuilding, but building up that foundational strength, which I know as a trainer for professional athletes is going to apply to and benefit any single person that steps in front of me. So with his golden 6 exercises, focusing on a priority of progressively overloading on the squat, bench, pull-ups or weighted pull-ups, the military press, barbell curls, and weighted crunches, Arnold knew how to build that base foundation and set the stage for performance. However, the one lack here was that there wasn't really a whole hell of a lot of athletic performance to follow. So while he had the right training to set the stage for it, he didn't necessarily take that next step into the athleticism. So for that, he gets a good solid 9, but not a perfect 10. And then of course, when it comes to the X Factor, I don't know, call me just a fan of his movies, but I always liked Arnold Schwarzenegger. I would always want to be in his presence. If I had a chance to train with him, you could never go wrong with him as a training partner. So for that, he's got to get a solid 10 in the X Factor category. So I said in the beginning how Jean Claude Van Damme was one of the most popular martial artists of our time. Well, at least my time. But the traditionalists will remind me, son, you're just not going back far enough in time, because we got to start talking about guys like Bruce Lee, or in this case, Chuck Norris. And there's no doubt that Chuck Norris was an athlete first yet again and an actor second. But when it comes to motivation, as badass as he is, I kind of always looked at him as like the nice guy, right? He always seemed friendly. I know he could kick my ass 7 ways till Sunday, but he just seemed nice. And I don't know if he'd be the right guy to get me really digging deep to perform my next set, so I have to give him a 7 in the motivation category.
Chuck Norris.
And now when it comes to the physique goal category, now listen, again, preferences are individual, and for me, I never really wanted to look like Chuck Norris. He just didn't have the amount of muscularity or definition that I was seeking. Now, it's not to say that he didn't look good or is not a good goal for a lot of people. He just wasn't necessarily my goal. And I have to admit that as a young kid, he always seemed to be sort of the older guy. You know, I had that stupid anybody older than 30 mentality is an old man. And of course, of the bunch we talked about so far, he seemed like the old guy to me. So when it comes to physique, I just didn't really match up with him, and I have to give him a 5 there.
Chuck Norris.
Now when we're talking about the training style, however, once again we're talking about an athlete first. So normally I would prefer the training style. But there are some key differences here that make me diverge a little bit. Look, you can never belittle the accomplishments in the competitive arena in both jiu-jitsu and judo. The problem was, his focus was always on the martial arts. And though he knew that weight training was an important component of his overall performance, he never really prioritized it. And in fact, when he did try to prioritize it and actually start to lift heavier, he experienced some injuries, namely one shoulder injury that kind of knocked him back quite a bit and changed his entire outlook on weight training and what role it really needed to play for him. And here is where he sort of put it in that sort of adjunct rehab and or prehab focus. And believe it or not, though he later on became famous for the Total Gym, he was actually exposed to this device many years prior to its release. And he was using this because he felt like it gave him the ability to, improve his strength as he moved his own body in space, but more importantly, it was kind to his joints and it allowed him to still perform at a high level without detracting from his performance as a martial artist. That being said, their focus not necessarily ever being on the progressively loading aspect of weight training is where we sort of diverge. And though I know that choosing the wrong exercises are likely going to get you hurt, there are a lot of exercises out there that are not going to do that, and for me, I have to just give him a 6 in terms of the congruence between my training approach and his.
Chuck Norris.
And when it comes to that X factor, can we all just agree that even though he does smile a lot, I bet you he could probably kill me with a smile too? The fact is, when we talk about Chuck Norris, there's sayings about him, for crying out loud. He doesn't do push-ups, but he pushes the ground down. He's got to get just that badass number 9 here when we talk about the X Factor category. And last but certainly not least, we have to talk about Sly, Sylvester Stallone. And when we talk about motivation, here's the interesting fact. I don't even need to train with him for him to motivate me. All I have to do is watch any one of the Rocky movies, which I've probably done 500 times a piece, and I'm going to be fired up to do my next workout. Or I just have to simply listen to the Rocky IV soundtrack, and I'm going to get the same result. So right here, I'm going to give him, of course, a 10 in the motivation category. Now, when it comes to the physique goal category, he was exactly who I wanted to look like. When I set out on day 1 of who I wanted to look like, it was Sylvester Stallone. And the reason for it was there was a high degree of relatability. Now, granted, I grew up an Italian kid, and of course the Italian stallion had a certain appeal to me. But beyond that, we're talking about 5'10", 173 pounds. Once again, certainly within my reach for someone that I want to look like. And again, we're talking about the perfect blend between the right amount of size and the right amount of definition. I just always aspired exactly to look like him. I mean, look, I haven't dressed like him and hung posters of him in my basement. At least I have my goals set from the very beginning at a very early age. He's going to get a 10 for the physique goal for me. Now, when it comes to the training style, it's well documented that Sly was an avid bodybuilder, right? He knew how important it was to aesthetically look a certain way to make an impact on camera. So he sought out guys like Franco Columbu to train him as a bodybuilder. But it didn't mean that he didn't pursue the athletic part of his job as well. He knew that being in Rocky was going to require him to learn how to box. He knew that he had to do some important fight choreography in order to make that look a certain way. You need a certain level of athleticism and coordination to be able to pull that off convincingly, and he did that. Of course, even the skills as a boxer, his jump rope ability, he had a high degree of athleticism that he worked on in conjunction with his training. Now, what did the training look like? Well, as any effective bodybuilder would do, he would vary his splits, but he landed most often on an upper-lower alternating day split. So upper body, one day, followed by lower body, and he did this 3 times for a total of 6 workouts in the week. With the right selection of exercises, you can actually disperse that volume responsibly between, let's say, the anterior chain and posterior chain, but still get the frequency needed to create the muscle gains that you're looking for. All the while, like I mentioned, still having the ability to perform athletically as he did, especially with all that extra boxing in-ring work. Guys, for me, his training style is going to get a solid 9.5. Now, when it comes to the X factor here, guys, I think I've probably already shown my bias, but you know, this is a subjective list, so we're all entitled to one. But I will tell you this, Sylvester Stallone is and always will be my main inspiration for what I do. He's the reason why I started what I do. He's the reason why I will continue to look to do what I do for many, many years to come. And when the guy that inspires you actually comments on your own Instagram post and leaves yet another inspiring message, he's always going to get a 10 in my book when it comes to that important X factor. And so now with all the rankings in, it's time to break out the final totals to reveal my #1 training partner choice, as if it's not already obvious. With every list though, guys, we have to start somewhere at the bottom, and for me, Chuck Norris is going to get that bottom spot with a total score of 27. Next up, we know Dolph Lundgren, somebody that I want to train with. Florian, let's make it happen, but I'm going to have to give him a score of 32.5 for his total. Next up, again, Van Damme's going to be the popular choice for a lot of you people out there. Make sure you leave your choice below, for me, he gets a total score of 34. Next up, this might be a surprise to some, but again, maybe I'm partial to the Rocky series, but Carl Weathers is going to get that next important ranking for me with a total of 35, which leaves the 2 big guys at the top. And of course, Arnold's going to get that second runner-up spot for me with a solid score of 37.5. Probably just falling short in terms of the relatability and the fact that I knew I could never look like this a day in my life. But of course, for me, as it will always be, Sylvester Stallone's at the top of the list at a solid score here, an almost perfect score of 39.5. And so now with that, I turn the decision over to you. Who's your choice? Who are these 6 are you picking? If you want to leave your entire list in the order of who you'd like to train with, please do so. Remember to thank your training partner too for skipping today's workout, because again, he probably gave you a hell of a better training partner. If you guys are looking for a complete training program, we have them all laid out for you over at ATHLEAN-X.com. If you haven't done so, make sure you click subscribe and turn your notifications so you never miss a new video when we put one out. All right, guys, see you soon.